Welcome to another episode of We Don't Die, where my goal is to give you evidence that although our bodies will disappear, we survive physical death. When we aren't afraid of death, we are less afraid of life. From these episodes, I aim for all of us to take more risks in our life, go after our dreams, have great relationships, and some fun and joy in the process. I'm your host, Sandra Champlain, author of the book, We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. And today on our show, we have the fabulous Pam Russell. And Pam is president and CEO of Proforma Specialty Marketing in Dallas, Texas. She's spent almost 20 years in a successful sales career in the promotional products and printing industry. In 2012, she founded Pam Russell, LLC, a sales training, coaching, and speaking business. Now, Pam has a passion for helping rookie salespeople and entrepreneurs master the business of selling so they don't struggle like she did in the beginning. Now, you might wonder what this all has to do with life after death, and we'll find out. But Pam had a 10-year journey through grief that came to an end in October of last year, and now has added an inspirational piece to her business. And as a result of her transition through grief, she is currently working on merging her two businesses under one umbrella that will include a third piece, which is inspirational speaking and purpose strategy. And this new business will be launched late this year. Pam believes that you can find your purpose through your pain. Let me say that again. You can find your purpose through your pain. She is a co-host of the Offbeat Business Show and co-editor-in-chief of the Offbeat Business Magazine. Pam is a single mom, a dog lover, a native Texan, and a fan of positivity and humor. We like her already. And she's a passionate volunteer in the memory care unit of a local nursing home. So Pam Russell, welcome to We Don't Die Radio.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be on your show.
I'm thrilled to have you, and I just was smiling, obviously, when I read your bio just now. You're a cool lady. You really are.
Thank you very much.
So there you are in Texas.
Yes, born and raised.
Born and raised. You don't have the Texan accent that I hear quite regularly.
People tell me that a lot. They tell me that. I'll say y'all, so you'll hear it. But people do tell me that I don't sound like I'm from Texas.
Well, I live in Massachusetts, and I don't say "pock the car" either.
Yeah, I wouldn't think that you lived in Massachusetts either, so that's interesting.
And I grew up in Connecticut, and and I've traveled a lot, and you have too. So, anyways, what in the world does everything you have to do here have to do with life after death? I'm reading, and you're such big into the marketing and your promotional products, and like so many of our guests so far, Pam, people, and even myself included. I mean, I'm a chef by trade and a business owner. What the heck are we doing in this conversation? So tell us a little bit about you, and maybe what happened that led you to a little bit more of a spiritual role in life.
Okay.
That's a big
My
question.
journey, I'm sorry, what did you say?
I said it's a big question, but do your best.
My journey through grief and everything started actually 10 years ago in December of this year when my parents died within the same week.
Oh, they did?
They died within the same week.
Do you mind if I asked what happened?
My mother was a nurse. This is actually a good message for people. My mother was an RN and retired, sort of. She was working 2 days a week. She had worked the day that she ended up in the hospital, but she had a urinary tract infection that she had been trying to treat herself with old antibiotics.
Oh, my. Okay.
And so she finally said to my dad, I need to go to the hospital. My blood pressure's like 68 over something crazy low. And took her, and she ended up having sepsis or septic shock. A lot of hospitals, doctors will call that blood poisoning.
Okay.
But basically her urinary tract infection got into her bloodstream. And it's very common. Sepsis is usually not a survivable situation. And So she was in the ICU for a long time in a coma with sepsis, and ended up coming out of that, which is a miracle in itself and probably a different discussion maybe, but she was in a rehab center. Blood pressure started dropping during dialysis, took her to the hospital. And actually she told my sister before they left with her to the hospital that she was going to leave our dad. And not meaning divorce, but meaning she was done.
Right.
Fighting this. This was about a 8-week period. And they were both 68 years old, so fairly young.
Yeah.
But she's like, I'm leaving. I can't do this. And so when she got to the hospital, sure enough, she passed away. And
so sorry. Wow.
Losing a parent, every grief situation is unique in my opinion.
Yeah.
And just like I've never lost a child, so I can imagine what that might feel like. But, just like losing a parent is a very unique grief.
Right.
And so we were all devastated. I have 3 sisters and a brother and very close family. And so we were all devastated. And that was on a Monday, so we're planning the funeral, and my father was devastated. I don't think he sat down that whole week leading up to her funeral. He was just devastated, and I was actually telling people that my gut was telling me that he wasn't going to be around long. And I told somebody on the way to their house on the day of my mother's funeral, which was on Friday. So when I got to the house, everybody was looking for my dad. He had gone for a walk. My dad didn't go for a walk. He didn't do that. And my sister and I went looking for him. We came back. There was an ambulance in the driveway. My father had left to go for this walk and ended up dying in the driveway the morning of my mother's funeral. Of, quote, a heart attack. We, of course, believe that it was grief and his broken heart.
Sure.
And, timing is impeccable. We took him the ambulance took him to the hospital. They announced him gone, pronounced him dead. And we went right from there to the funeral home for our mother's funeral. And on the way there, and this we can talk about after, but on the way there was a ladybug in the Suburban that we were in, and I joked and said, I bet that's Mom, just making sure we're all okay. Right. This was in December. In Texas in December, we don't have ladybugs.
Ladybugs, no.
Yeah. So anyway, everyone was already on their way. People were in town for my mother's funeral, so we decided to just go ahead and my mom was cremated. They wanted to be cremated, and my dad would be cremated. So we were just like, okay, we're just going to stand up in front of everybody and tell them that Dad passed away.
I can't even imagine that.
It was. None of us remember anything that day after.
No, of course not.
We don't remember the people eating in their home. We don't remember any of that. But definitely devastating for sure. And that kind of put me in the year following their death, I gained 70 pounds.
I can relate because I gained everything back after Dad died. Still haven't taken it off.
Yes, still working on that.
Yeah.
And really stayed in a fog for 10 years that I started to come out of last year. And it was a grief fog. It was a place where I realize now that the fog is lifted, that it was a place where I was living to where their deaths, defined who I was. My parents dying so close together defined who I was, and that's how I lived my life. And now I live my life. Now their lives define me, what they brought to my life, the love they gave me, the experiences and the memories. Now those things define my life, and it's a much better place to be.
That's brilliant. That really is. I can kind of get it, not even being close in your shoes, but to be a product of the 2 deaths so fast, and that became your life.
It did. So I'm happy to be released from that and not in that pit anymore, but it certainly has served its purpose in my life with changes in my business and experiences. I know some of your guests have talked about experiences with people, their loved ones after they've died. And
Right.
I would love to share one
Oh,
specific, for sure, that I had that is
we
very cool, I
we'd
think.
love you to share as many as
Okay.
you want to. Because the thing is, Pam,
Um,
I think we all, not all, but a lot of people have had
yeah.
things happen, and it helps everybody to hear, first of all,
Hmm.
obviously a big, gigantic hug and my condolences for your parents' loss. I
Thank
can't,
you.
I had half of that. I had my dad die, and that
Hmm.
was devastating. So I can't
Devastating.
imagine double. I can't.
Hmm.
And that it does take a long time, and everybody grieves at their own rate. And
Yes.
don't make yourself wrong for it. So thank you
Hmm.
for also giving us hope that it was lifted,
Hmm.
and there's something new available to you, the way that you really can be a product of your parents and look at all the good that you've been given from them and who you are. So you're a
Yes.
phenomenal woman. So yeah,
Thank
we
you.
would love to hear why you believe we don't die. Hit it, sister.
Okay. So, so a couple of days after all of this happened, after their funeral, I was home, and I was laying I had set my alarm for 5:30 like I always did. My alarm went off that morning. I was laying on my side in my bed.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, I feel something roll over and up against me in my bed. And I am single. I was single then, and there wasn't anybody in my bed. And so I was like, my dad was a big guy, 6'4", stout guy. And the first thing I thought of was, that feels like
Dad.
Dad would be rolling up against me. And so I was like, okay, no, 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 no. So then a few minutes later, it rolled away, and a few minutes later, it rolled back. And I was like, oh, I was freaking out a little bit, actually. And so I thought, okay. So I didn't open my eyes. I didn't move. And then the next thing I felt was, it was like somebody was taking their hand, it was still on my side, taking their hand and stroking the bottom part of my leg, my calf, on top of the covers, just so gently.
Hmm.
And I was thinking, am I really feeling this? And so I moved my leg, and it stopped, and then it started again. And a little bit regretfully, I never opened my eyes to see if that was my father standing there doing
Right.
that. I was a little scared to see my dad
Oh,
standing in front of me.
of course.
you know? And so the next thing that happened was I felt this huge amount of energy, and I could almost hear a swoosh go with it, go up through the ceiling of my room. And it was gone. And it was amazing experience. I will say that I didn't stay in my house for 2 nights after that. It really was
Yeah,
a
it's
very powerful experience
sure. And
that I
scary.
feel it
You
was
know,
scary. Hmm.
scary at one hand, it's comforting. I mean, I talk to a lot of people that have actually seen, whether you call them ghosts or apparitions or our loved ones, and no matter
Hmm.
what I've done, I don't think I could handle seeing somebody in my room.
Yeah.
I don't. So as
Um,
comforting as it is that they're still around, there
yes,
still is some discomfort there. So
absolutely.
anyway, sorry
I
to
know it was
interrupt.
my dad. Oh,
Yeah.
that's right. I know it was my father, and I feel so blessed that he chose to come and comfort
Hmm.
me. I know that's what he was there for, and in my sadness, and it was great. I am so grateful for that. There's other experiences. I don't know how much time we have or
Oh,
how
we
many
have
you want to
time.
hear about.
Yeah, keep going.
Okay, so my sister, actually, not probably about 6 months after that, I kept praying and asking to just hear their voices. To me, that is something that you
Yes.
just don't think about. Missing is hearing their voice. For me, anyway, I was like, I just want to hear my mom's voice, and
Yes.
so I was hoping for that. And so one night I had a dream, and they were in my dream, and they were kind of shadows on the blinds behind my desk where I work in the dream. And I just said, I guess it had been in the dream, I guess it had been happening a lot, and I had told myself the next time that happens, I'm going to ask if that's them, my mom and
Hmm.
dad. So in the dream, I said, "Is that you, Mom?" And she said, "Yes, honey, I'm here." And I said, "Is Dad with you?" And he said, "Yes, I'm here too, honey." And then I woke up. And I woke up, sat up in bed, started it was the middle of the night. I started clapping my hands,
Aw.
bouncing up and down in the bed, so excited to
Because let me
have
just
that dream.
ask, was it a dream like a normal dream, or was it one of those dreams that was so vivid and so real, like it was really happening?
So vivid, like it was real and happening. I
Yep.
remember it, every moment of it. It was very short,
Right.
but very powerful and meaningful to me. It was so wonderful.
Yeah, because
Um,
most dreams, I think we all can agree, they can be so vivid and real, and then moments after you wake up, it's like, what was that
yes,
dream? And I've
yes,
heard from other people that they're so vivid and dream and real that they last. The memory of
yes,
them lasts, and that could be a
yes,
sign of a real visitation as opposed to just a dream.
yes,
So
absolutely.
there you were clapping,
I was clapping,
happy.
happy, and went
Oh,
back to bed and called my sisters and my brother in the morning and told them about it. It was amazing to have that visit from them.
yeah.
Um, my daughter, who was in third grade at the time,
Mm-hmm.
her and her cousin, who was the same age, they actually found Dad in the driveway. We were all looking for him,
Oh,
and their car was kind of hiding him, and they were playing in the backyard, and they actually found him. And so uh, she was, she had a little bit of post-traumatic stress
sure.
from that, but she came down one day. She was upstairs in her room playing not long after they died, and she came down and said, "I saw Nana today."
I
And I was
found
like,
Nana.
she
Nana's
said she saw
mom.
Nana.
Yo, saw
Nana
Nana.
is my mom.
Yeah.
And I said, "You did?" She said, "Yep, just so nonchalantly. Kids are so great." She's like, "She was just up in the corner of my room, and she had like a white cloud around her, and she was just smiling at me, and she told me she loved me, and then she was gone."
Oh, how sweet.
So amazing. My hope is that everyone can experience this kind of thing. It just gives you so much hope and peace, to know they're around. And now I haven't had any experience for a while, so I don't know if, from your experience or from all the people you've talked to, if there seems to be a time limit to it. But
I
most
don't
of it happen
know
pretty
the
quickly.
answer to that because you know what? I had so many wild and crazy things happening back
Mhm.
in 2002, 2004,
Mhm.
2003, 2005, that whole
Mhm.
range. And then it's like I don't, well, I'm not also looking for them. I mean, I'm not out
Right.
doing all kinds of
Right.
things now, but
Mhm.
part of me thinks that we get what we get when we need it.
Mhm. Yes, that's a great point.
And it doesn't mean they're not still around,
Right.
but it takes a lot of energy, people say, for our loved ones to, however they manipulate energy to show up in
Mhm.
dreams or to turn on and
Mhm.
off the light switch and stuff. And that
Mhm.
there's also learning to be done, whether you call it the other side or the
Mhm.
hereafter or heaven.
Mhm.
And so, nothing wrong with it, but it's like if you don't
Right.
presently need them, you may not get a lot. Or
Yes.
or you may, who knows? I'm
Mhm.
not the expert on that, but
Right.
did it
Um,
help you with your grief?
um, it happened. Those things happened, within the first year.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Um, so, did it help me with my grief? I think it helped me more with my grief now
Mm-hmm.
than it did. I think it helped me then, but I think it helps me more now, looking back and just realizing that they were really there with me, and that that they are possibly still with me, and I just haven't had any experiences with them, that they can see the things that I'm accomplishing and see the things that my daughter is accomplishing and our family is doing together. And, um, it helps me to feel like they can see all of this and are watching down on us.
I
So,
I think they
you
can.
know,
I my last guest that I have on, and
mm-hmm,
if anyone's already heard this show, I'll just make this brief. But I had a medium on a
mm-hmm,
couple months ago, and he said after our interview, he's like, your dad's with you, and he's a little
mm-hmm.
upset that you're not talking to him because he's
Ah,
been right there, and it's like, oh, okay, And then I just went about my business. Well, the guy calls me a month later, and he says, your dad's telling me you're still not talking to him. And it's like,
Oh.
oh, well, then it gets better because yesterday I was in a car with a woman coming from a TV interview and we were on our
Mhm.
way to the airport and she says, oh, I got to ask you something. She says, I am psychic. And I said, yeah. She says, is your dad deceased? Well, yeah. She says, was his name John? I said, yep.
Oh.
She says, well, he wants me to say that you're still not talking to him. I'm like, so now dad's been gone 4.5 years. It's not like I've been getting signs or anything either, but Pam, it's just such a reassurance that he's still around. And I think,
Yeah.
I don't think, I mean, there's a fine line. I mean, there's a lot of people that are grieving that want to
Mhm.
know their loved ones are okay. And then there's others
Mhm.
that like want to talk to them every day. So I don't think it's
Mhm.
that sort of thing, but just for
Mhm.
my dad to maybe be telling me, I can quiet my mind and kind of just still have a talk with him, just knowing that
Yeah.
he's still around. So I think your parents are too, and they're busy
Yeah.
doing other things, but in a
Yes.
moment they can be right back with
Yeah.
you or your daughter.
Yeah. Um, yeah. It was a friend of my sister's, a good friend of the family. She had a dream one time about my dad, and she described what the house kind of house he was in, and how beautiful the surroundings were. This was after they died, of course, and described what he looked like
Yeah,
in the dream she had.
right.
And one of my sisters remembered that we had a picture of my dad that looked like that, and she described him with this beard that just went around his chin, at the bottom of his face with no
Mhm.
mustache or anything. And so she was like, it's the way she's describing him looks just like this picture. So we found the picture and showed it to her, and she goes, that's exactly what he looked like in the dream I had. And so
Oh,
it
that's
made us
great.
believe that they just live in a much younger life, a
Yes,
younger
yes.
version of themselves.
I've heard that a zillion times. I mean, zillion's an
Yeah.
exaggeration, but a lot of times.
Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting. So, I believe they are around. And the ladybug. I know that your guest Virginia had mentioned a
Mhm.
hummingbird.
Yep,
I don't know if you remember that
I
from that
do.
interview.
I do.
But the ladybug. I mentioned the ladybug earlier, and we see. Like, for instance, we took our parents' ashes, or my dad's ashes, to Iowa to sprinkle on his parents' grave. And we had said, wouldn't it be cool if we saw a ladybug? And sure enough, a few minutes later, a ladybug landed on my niece's arm. And so they show up all the time.
Oh.
They show up all the time now. And we know that that's our mom. Or we feel
That's
like it's our mom
sweet.
checking on us.
There's a woman with the name of Christine Duminiak, and she's got
Hmm.
a couple books out and has been on TV and lots of interviews. Heaven Talks to Children is one of her things, but she talks a lot about the signs we get in communicating
Mm-hmm.
with our loved ones. And she says, prayer is necessary to
Hmm.
connect, but then she says, ask for a specific sign, and whether it's a favorite song or a ladybug or a butterfly or
Hmm.
something like that. When
Hmm.
there's something specific, or leaving a penny or a nickel or a dime or something, when there's
Hmm.
something specific, it becomes easier for that person to be able to like manifest that. So it sounds like and
Oh.
she has got tons of stories on, you know, the penny wasn't enough, so it was a dime, and just these really great stories. And there's even a lot with the butterflies, and you heard Virginia Hummel with the hummingbird.
Hmm.
But your thing with your mom is ladybug,
Ladybug.
is what it sounds like to me.
Yes, and I don't know if I spoke that into existence that day that her funeral,
Yeah.
and the day my dad died in the Suburban that day, but they're definitely, we definitely see them at times when we, really, really need to see
Yeah.
them.
Pam, do you
It's
think
great.
something happened to kind of lift the cloud of grief finally after the 10 years, or do you think it was just like naturally your body's like, okay, enough?
Hmm. No, something happened. The something I didn't tell you earlier, but the 10 years, I gained the 70 pounds,
Mm-hmm.
and I really had been using food even though I didn't really gain any more weight, I maintained that weight, and you have
Mm-hmm.
to eat to maintain that weight
Yes, I know
gain.
that.
And
Mm-hmm.
so I was using food to try to heal my grief, to try to fill that hole inside of me that was so huge and too big to deal with and too big to ignore. And my heartache and longing to just, I absolutely miss my father, but my mom and I
Yes.
talked every day, and
Yes.
I still long to talk to her.
Yeah, I got it.
Um,
I have that relationship with my mom now. I get
yes,
it. I can't even
um,
imagine not having that.
yes. So actually, what happened was last summer, a friend of mine realized she was an alcoholic and
Hmm.
had started going to AA meetings, and she kept asking me to come, not because I had a drinking problem, but just to support her.
Right.
So I went, and I think everybody should go to at least one AA meeting. The most non-judgmental, supportive place I've ever been, and I was just spectator.
Right.
um, so I was actually shocked by my experience there because I was really trying to have to choke down all this emotion that was trying to come up.
Hmm.
And when I left, my friend and I got in my car, and I had a complete meltdown, realizing that I had a problem with food.
Hmm.
And so I felt led to start writing. And I started writing, and it was very cathartic for me, and really is what instigated the release of the grief. And I put it in a blog, and I started writing in October, and I didn't release the blog till February of this year. And
Wow.
I think I had like 20,000 words written by the time I released it in different blog posts.
Uh-huh.
And so I released it and was honest about my secret, because people didn't really know that I was using food. I mean, obviously I was still overweight, but they didn't realize why.
Right.
And I'm a private person when it comes to that. I think secrets are private.
Yeah.
Secrets are private. So I told my truth instead of keeping it a secret. And honestly, I haven't written a word on that blog since, because it was instant healing by releasing my secret and being honest about I've been in a pit of grief for 10 years, and I was using food. And now I'm not using food, and I am free. Um, so that's
Incredible.
what happened to me. And that might not happen for everybody. It may not be writing for everybody. And that's also when I started volunteering in the
Nursing
nursing
home?
home. My mother had a heart for the elderly.
Oh,
That's where she
yeah.
spent her years as a nurse, director of nurses in nursing homes. She was an advocate for them. She wasn't just an employee there. She was an advocate for the patients there. And I have that same heart. And so I started working there, serving there, volunteering there, and specifically in the memory care, because my father was at the beginning stages of Alzheimer's when he passed. He hadn't been diagnosed, but my mom knew what that looked like.
Hmm.
And so, now I see the blessings. Thank you, Lord, that my dad does not have to go through Alzheimer's. And thank you, Lord, that we don't have to go through Alzheimer's with him, and see him in that place of literally losing his mind.
Oh, it's
And
tough. It's very tough.
and so that's also when I started volunteering there. And it's not for everybody, but it's for me. And so finding that outlet reminds me of the blessing of him being taken when he was taken, and honoring my mother's memory, and then the writing and telling my secret. Those two things are what released me from my pit of grief.
It's interesting. I created an audio called How to Survive Grief.
Hmm.
And if anybody wants to hear it, if you go to the show website, we-don't-die-radio.com, I have what's called the Insiders Club, and I don't tell
Hmm.
anybody really what's inside. But in there is, you can press play and listen to the How to Survive Grief audio. But
Hmm.
two of the techniques that I wrote about, and what's just hitting me is what you're talking about is like a
Hmm.
living demonstration that it actually works, is one, volunteering, and
Hmm.
whether you call it volunteering or doing something to make a difference for another, even if it's helping a next door neighbor with something, or anytime you get the focus off you and onto other people,
Hmm.
it allows kind of a something in our brain for some healing
Hmm.
process to take place. And then the other thing, which it just like makes sense, and like you and I have both dealt with the food issue,
Hmm.
I continue to, but
Hmm. I do too some.
yeah, I mean,
I do too some.
yeah, but what
Hmm.
you're saying, it just kind of hit me that one of the things I recommend people do is to have a journal, and journal, I mean, like
Hmm.
write, meaning the thoughts that are on your mind.
Mm-hmm.
Put them on paper. Nobody ever has to
Yeah.
read it or put it in your
Right.
computer, but just when you get it out of your head and onto something, somehow it releases it. And it seems like, and I'm just looking at my own personal struggles.
Mm-hmm.
I often eat because of the things in my head, and what a great thing that would be to try for any of us is to just journal it, to write it down. And it could be
Uh-huh.
nonsense coming out, it could be big stuff, but
Yes.
I'm willing, I want to try that to see because it also helps through grief, but I think it might help us in a lot of other ways, like it did with you. That's
Yes. And
awesome.
through this, and it also, when your fog clears, I realized I actually slipped a little bit, and I think this is normal because I do call it an addiction that I had to food. I think it's normal to slip a little bit when you start to get out of that addiction. I've read that it's normal to have a relapse, I guess they call it. And so I had about a day and a half of relapse of going back to my old junk.
Oh, that's nothing.
And, well, it was interesting. Thank you for saying that. So I'll consider that a good thing.
Yes.
But it was interesting because I was able to see what I was doing because the fog lifted, but it was a very emotional experience for me because I thought, wow, my fog is lifted, and now I was like hovering above myself, watching myself do what I was doing, and I was like, I lived that way for 10 years and didn't even blink an
Yeah,
eye.
right.
And now I'm able to see it and stop it. And I always tell people, I've learned to walk through my feelings instead of stuffing my feelings in every part of my life.
Yeah, which is hard to do. Oh my
Physically, right?
gosh.
It
Very,
is.
very hard
It
to.
is.
And the fog is a normal part of grief. I mean, our brain chemistry changes when we grieve. I mean, so many people don't remember, the day, you say when your folks had when the funeral happened and stuff, we
Hmm.
actually lose some healthy neurotransmitters in our system that we can't remember, and it messes with our communication center, our memory, our
Hmm.
perception, and so
Hmm.
that fog is what you're describing. It's all very real, and then once our system becomes normalized again, that comes back, and you did some really good things to help you through. But what I want to tie in now, if you don't
Yes.
mind, is
Hmm.
because I think there's a big link between you helping people get successful in the sales business
Hmm.
and teaching sales training and going for results, and
Hmm.
somehow I have the sneaky suspicion you are or you're figuring out how to tie this into living life. Is that right?
Absolutely. I am actually in the middle, or at 75% through a rebranding because of my experience over the last year since this shift
Wow.
started happening. And very passionate about people understanding, number one, that they can find their purpose through their pain, whether that be grief or divorce or whatever that is. Um, and so helping people realize what their purpose is and getting clear on how they can monetize it, and that's okay to monetize it, if that makes sense. Um,
It does, and it doesn't, because I think, and
it's weird to
it
think.
is weird. It
Uh-huh.
is weird because, like, if we use me for an example, my pain is dad died, right?
Yes.
Awful. But out of it came my search for what it's all about, life
Yes.
after death, grief, and so now I'm not only helping people, but technically, yeah, it is a business,
It
right?
is. It is a business, and um, I am 47 years old.
Hey, I'm
Never would
48.
I. Yes. Never would I ever have
Mm-mm.
thought when my parents died that 10 years later, I'm in the middle of writing a book. I have several others that I want to do. Never did I ever think that writing would be a part of my purpose. And I
Right.
wouldn't discover that until I'm 47 years old.
Hmm.
So, if you can keep, you know, get, try to come out of that fog and see what that looks like, it's amazing. So
Hmm.
helping people find that purpose and having clarity on that. And part of that is promotional products and marketing that purpose. It's also sales coaching and some purpose coaching for that purpose, and then being inspiring others through that purpose.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, part of me felt like, I've got to downplay the book. I can't make money off it, but it's just like
Mm-mm.
we need, and it's not really about making money. It's about paying
Right.
the bills and paying the mortgage and following our passion. Everybody says you're successful when you follow what you love.
Yes.
And somebody once said, if you don't want to make money for you, that's fine. There's a lot of pain and suffering and starvation in the world. Do it for
Yes.
them and give it away. So they're
Mm.
really, it's not like a selfish thing, but out of
Right.
finding and tapping into what your purpose is in life really can come your passion and then
Yes.
your business and your
Yes.
power and in your income. So what, right?
Yes. Yes. An example I gave to somebody the other day, and this isn't necessarily supportive or not
Hmm.
supportive of this organization, but a great example of that is Nancy Brinker, who started the Susan G. Komen Foundation. I mean, her sister died of breast cancer.
Oh yeah,
She was in pain, and now her career is um, supporting breast cancer. And so,
right.
you know, that's a huge example of what that could look like.
And nothing wrong with that at all. You
Right.
need money to say sustain your message and to
Hmm.
keep things going. That's awesome. So, um, I found something that you wrote on one of your blogs.
Ah.
I was investigating. Well, it was right on
Uh-huh.
the last one you had posted. And it says, I believe you have to say your goals, desires, etc. out loud and with confidence,
Mm-hmm.
and then you put in parentheses, say it like you mean it, baby,
Yes.
to help manifest them in your life. Can
Yes.
you relate that a little bit just for all of us actually, who may
Mm.
not ever get to be part of your coaching or read your book when it comes out, like
Yes.
a difference
Yes.
that, there's a lot of things I want to do and like how, maybe give us an action step that we can take
Okay.
today that would make a difference.
Okay, great. So let's say I'm going to use myself as an example. One of my, I call it an audacious goal, is to be on the stage at a Women of Faith conference. And
Okay.
listeners may not know what that is, but it is a Christian-based conference, but it's huge. It travels all across the country, and it's a big, huge conference. And I want to speak at that conference, and so that's a goal. And everyone should have one or two audacious goals, in my opinion. And
Hmm.
so, of course, that is written, got to be written. Of course, that is on my, I call it a see it board. But you have to say it. So I could be in my car, and I just start saying, thank you so much, Women of Faith, for hiring me to speak at your event. Thank you, Women of Faith, for the $10,000 check for speaking at your event. Thank you, Women of Faith, for advertising that I'm going to be at your conference. And, some people think I'm crazy for that, but I'm going to tell you it works. It helped me get best speech for my first speech at Toastmasters. It helped me get a $5,000 client one month. It works. It works. You have to. It's a trifecta of goal achievement, in my opinion.
So you're saying
So
write it, see it, like so you post things up around you, maybe the
yes,
words, vision board, and then you're saying say it out loud like it's already
like it's
happened,
so. Yes, like it is so. Yes.
like it is so.
That is something that people miss, is the say it, in my opinion. And I think they also miss that a lot of people have vision boards and they have all these great quotes, or
Oh,
maybe
right.
some,
Great
maybe some
pictures.
Christians have scriptures or whatever.
Uh-huh.
But your vision boards should mirror your written goals. So you should have visions on your vision board that match up to your written goals. Not just, you can have sayings and stuff too, but you should have that on your vision board. It all needs to align.
Some
So
people
that
don't know what vision boards are, and we only have about 5 minutes left, so I
yes.
want to just so because I can see now, and it's funny, everything I'm up to, I really
Mm-hmm.
don't have written out what my goals are or where I see myself in the big picture. I have like a imprint of it in my mind,
Yes,
but
that's good.
but yeah, but no wonder I'm not taking faster action because I really don't have it spelled out. I have no vision board, which you're going to explain what that is,
Mm-hmm.
and no way have I been saying it out loud like it's already
Yes,
so.
and I'm happy to talk to you we can set up a
Yeah,
time to talk about that further. Happy to
sure.
do that for you, Sandra.
Thanks.
But so a see it board, vision board is, so for, let's say, I'll use the Women of Faith example. So I have a picture of the logo of Women of Faith on my See It board, and I also did a mock check made out to me. Women of Faith is the issuer, and it's for the amount I want them to pay me to speak at their event.
Love it.
So that is on my See It board. So that ties into my written audacious goal that I want to speak for Women of Faith. And you could have it, if you have a graphic designer, they could superimpose you on the stage and have Women of Faith banner in the background if you wanted to do that, whatever. But yes, that all needs to tie together. And it's proven that sets your brain, the intention in your mind and your brain, that is something you want to achieve. And looking at it and saying those things on a regular basis, not just doing it once, but on a regular basis, you'll be amazed.
How regular is a regular basis?
Twice a day would be great.
Okay.
My vision board is on the wall in my office, so I see it all day.
Okay.
People that do the
advice.
minimum of just writing their goals,
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember the exact percentage, but they make like 10-15% more than people that don't write them down. It's some crazy percentage.
Oh, I think it's actually more than that. I think
it
there's
is more than that.
a huge amount of people that actually have a chance of achieving their goals once they write it down. But if you're writing it, you're seeing it and saying it out loud like it's already happened. And I always like to throw in a little gratitude. I mean, I think gratitude, I think it was Louise Hay that I heard say, she had everybody picture a little kid at Christmas time, and you open a present and you don't say thank you. Well, you don't really care about the present. Well, who really wants to give anything to that kid ever again?
Right.
And so she was comparing it to gratitude. The more grateful for what we have, the more we'll get. So the more that little kid's just like, thank you, Aunt Pam. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Love you, love you, love you. The more you're going to want to give. So it was just a funny, but it hit me. Add some gratitude in, and I've had some freaky, wonderful things show up in my life doing that. And but the key is to make it a practice, which I haven't done. So do it on a regular basis. Well, Pam, can you just look inside that beautiful brain of yours and your beautiful woman? And for people that want to check her out, if you go to WeDon'tDieRadio.com, there's a picture of beautiful Pam Russell there.
Thank you.
And just look inside. Is there anything else? We have just a couple minutes left that maybe you just have a burning desire to say, or you might have forgotten to say, or just somebody who might be in that 10-year grieving process that just might be a little bit of hope.
Yeah. First of all, I would encourage them to understand that grief is a unique process for everybody. And as long as you're being somewhat healthy through that process, there's no time limit, really. I think the loss is really going to always be there. So I would say give yourself a break if you feel pressure that from other people in your life to come on, get out of it. Give yourself a break. Let the process happen. And I wouldn't change anything about my 10 years.
Right.
And so let the process happen and pay attention to possible experiences that you might be discounting or saying didn't really happen. Pay attention. And because something could be happening around you, like happened to me, and maybe have happened to your other guests, is your loved one trying to show you a sign or communicate with you in some form or fashion that will give you some peace. So pay attention and cut yourself some slack and walk through the grieving process. Try not to stuff it and walk through it.
Yeah, and don't make yourself wrong for it or wherever you are.
I love that phrase.
Yeah, and just love yourself no matter
Love
what.
yourself.
Yeah, and Pam, how can we keep in touch with you and find out and keep track of when the book comes out? So you have a website you can share?
Yes, it is Pam-Russell, 2 S's, 2 L's, .com. And that will be redirected to my new one once it launches at the end of December. But that is where you can find me. And my email address is there. I would love to hear from anybody that has any thoughts or questions or anything. They're welcome to email me.
That's great. And I thank you. And it's really exciting to see how you've used your business, what you've been doing in the past, and you've added it in. And now I love it. Say your
Thank you.
goals, desires out loud and with confidence, like you mean it, baby.
Like you mean it, baby. That's right.
Write it, see it, and say it out loud.
Yep.
Pam Russell, you've been a delight. Really
Thank you.
phenomenal.
It's been fun.
And to our listener today, I know there's things you could have been doing with this hour, or you might be out for a walk or in your car or wherever it is that you are, and you've made this a priority to listen. I thank you. Pam thanks you. And we really do hope that it's made a difference. It certainly has brought a smile to my face. And I thank you for tuning into these episodes. And just a reminder, when you go to we-don't-die-radio.com, you can see all the past episodes. If you're an iTunes user, you can certainly click on one of the guest names and be brought to there. And if you really love the show, you know, what I'm going to ask you now is if you sign into iTunes and you can leave a rating. It does make a difference when people say, great show. More people will see it. So this is Sandra Champlain. I've been your host on We Don't Die Radio. I believe that life is an education for our souls and that your life here on earth is important. So, like Pam said, write it, see it, and say it out loud. I thank you for listening, and we'll see you soon.